It's the time of the year when we're all trying to set our goals, making new resolutions, thinking about change, and doing something different. Each one of these comments has a common thread. They're all about altering your behavior to establish expectations. The problem is, I don't think goal setting really works. You're listening to Idea Charger Radio. Hey there, Success Chargers. Welcome back. It's episode 19, How to Meet Your Goals Every Time. Why in the world would I open then by saying that I don't think goal setting really works? Well, I think it does, but we'll get into in episode 20 why I don't think you should ever set goals. But until then, let's talk about how you can beat the goals that you set every single time. And let me tell you where I'm really coming from here. This is sort of based on a conversation that happened a couple of years ago between me and Diane Riley, who is, you can follow her on Twitter at LeadershipBest. And we got into a conversation online because I saw where she had sent out a Benjamin Franklin quote that said this: "The best way to see faith is to shut the eye of reason." Now, here's what's interesting. When I read this, I immediately honed in on the words faith and reason, and both of them were capitalized when she put this out there. So instantly, my perception of the quote was that having faith from a spiritual perspective was exclusive of being able to apply reason when explaining the quote unexplainable or something one does not fully understand, right? Which is the definition of faith. Now, Diane and I went back and forth, and we had a very pleasant exchange online regarding the quote. And I learned that her perspective was less about the religious aspect of faith and more about the acceptance of topics that affected us in life in a much more general sense. So what I learned there was by being open-minded to her thoughts that I began to think about how the quote was truly relevant to both of us. So even though the implied meaning of the exact same grouping of words, that's the quote, it appeared to mean something very different to both of us. And that's kind of what got me here about this idea of goal setting doesn't really matter. Well, it matters, but maybe it doesn't always work. And there was a big question of why doesn't it work? So I think sometimes it comes down to what you may write down or distill down to an idea or a concept or a goal may be translated by one person one way and by someone else another, which is something I talk to a lot of my clients about, particularly frontline managers that maybe haven't yet developed the skill of being very clear about identifying and then sharing what it is they truly expect from their employees. And the sad thing is it sets up both sides for failure. So let me go back and sort of share a story with you that happened to me a few years ago when I was working on a customer retention project for a client that had brought me in for a short period of time. And he had recently purchased a new product line. It was previously a separate standalone business that was complementary to what his main business was. And so he sort of brought that in and decided it would be a new division of his overall company. Okay, you got that? You following me? Okay. So the client and I agreed to do a list of expectations. This is all outlined in the contract. And there were various incentives that were tied to those things that, would give me the incentive to really perform on this. And it set, of course, of action that had a very lofty of 75% customer retention. Now, keep in mind, this was a company that had been fully acquired, so it wasn't like trying to just go nab clients from somebody else and get them to come over. There was no choice. They either continued to do business with who they had done business with before, albeit now under a new name, or they were just going to have to go somewhere else. And it was an exclusive product that had sort of required some annual maintenance to it, that once you committed to the purchase, you kind of were committed to continue using some sort of a maintenance service for a couple of years, or it wasn't going to work. So now this is pretty interesting because I ran into a challenge. Now this seemed pretty clear about what the goal was, right? 95% retention. But we ran into an issue that turned out to be a real flashpoint when we figured out that some of the data regarding specifically the list of existing customers Well, it became pretty evident quickly that there was a fair amount of data that was missing. Phone numbers, addresses, other customer specifics, some things that made it impossible for me to reach out to them. Okay. So keep this in mind. Here's a list provided to me. I have a 95% continue rate anticipated, but he hired me to make, personal call, personal appeal to all of these folks and try to keep them on as clients. So in my mind, to gauge that success rate, we had to use the base number of people that I could actually call. I mean, I didn't have customer information, right? It seemed reasonable to me at the time. Well, let's be honest. It sounds reasonable to me now, but I think you'll see where the conversation goes. So there were a couple of subgroups within the original list, and I'd say somewhere, if memory serves, there was somewhere in the neighborhood of, 300 customers or something. And so that 95% was a pretty big number. So here's what we had. Number one, we had a subgroup. There was a specific group on that list that the owner of the company said, you know what, don't call these people, specifically pull them off your list. I'm going to call them myself because I've been looking for a reason to talk to some of these people about some of the other services we provide. Okay, that makes sense. All right, so he wanted to do those himself. And then second, of course, were the people that I couldn't call him because I didn't have a working number or a number at all. In some cases, I didn't even have the ability to send them a postcard, an email, nothing. Nothing at all, right? The previous company owner had done business with these folks by providing the service at their home or at their lake house, for example, and they would just tape a bill, right, to the storm door. And then on the weekend, when that person would show up at their lake house, they'd find the bill, put a check in the envelope, and send it in. And just, the money showed up. The client was taken care of. So they just never recorded that information, which seemed kind of unusual to me. But it worked for them. And, that's just the way the company had run. So kind of loose. And you get away with that sometimes. As a real small company, you have that personal connection, personal relationship. But it underscores as well, though, the importance of having some sort of a connection to your people that allows you to, collect the right kind of data and have systems in place that allows you to build a deeper relationship with those people that you're doing the services for. But anyway, it seemed pretty reasonable. You said you were going to call this group. All right, we'll take them out of the bottom of that denominator of the fraction. And then the people that have, missing data, well, there's no way I can reach out to them either. So it seemed reasonable to take those out. But my client didn't see it that way. And we had a huge disagreement about this. So while we were not explicit in discussing how to handle the poor data set, we had agreed on the percentage that we were looking for. And even though both sides wanted success, the dispute over how we were going to calculate that actually got us to a point where the contract was terminated early because the client refused to pay out incentive that I had hit the way I was calculating that information, which, again, seemed reasonable to me at the time. But he just didn't see it that way and said, well, I wanted 95% of this full group. Okay, but come on, man, I've already done the work. I'd worked for him at that point for, several months trying to get there. So, it brought us to the idea that there's sometimes a disconnect in the expectations, right? So the term goal is often used as a substitute for expectation or, what is the desired income? So if you think about that, outcome, sometimes desired outcome can be somewhat subjective if you're not careful. Right? So maybe you've heard a boss or a team leader or someone who owns a company who's upset when a goal was exceeded by 50%. Or maybe a boss who just says, we need more, but he shouts disappointment when the sales team only turns in, a few dollars more than what they did the year before. They thought they hit the goal. The boss really had something else in mind. Let's look at the other side. How about when the media reaction to a sports team who handily whips their opponent on the field? The superior team wanted to win, but often find themselves blasted for critics for being unsportsmanlike because they beat them, but they beat them too bad. Are you confused? Yeah, me too, right? You should be. Expectations should be clear by both sides every single time. So that brings us to the topic. How are you going to beat your goals every time? Look, there's two things you can do that always allow you to beat your goals, all right? Number one, sandbag, right? One of my favorites. Love this one. Just set the bar extremely low, right? something you know you're capable of doing, or worse, you've already got the commitments, you just haven't turned in the paperwork, you haven't actually executed the documents, but it's done deal. They're in the bag. It's ready to go. You know what? Just set the bar as low as possible so you can create this unbelievable artificial feeling of accomplishment that fills that short-term desire of feeling successful. The sad thing, it rarely delivers that long-term satisfaction that truly successful people are looking after. But it's there. It's an option. So in other words, lie, set the bar low, blow it out of the water when you've already got the deal sewn up. You can do it. What I might suggest, though, is that a better way is to focus on changing your behavior. You see here, it's a little less about the goal, but let's talk about this. Because sometimes you have big expectations, okay? The key is to change your behavior. That's what managements really want. Look, I've worked with enough companies and enough managers to find out that they say, well, I have to give people our number. Why? You don't trust them to come up with a number on their own? Maybe their forecasting is kind of crummy, but what do you really want? Well, I want them to do a better job. How much of a better job? Do you want $1 more? Do you want 300% what they did last year? Do you want to quadruple, the amount of business they're doing over a 5-year period? What do you really want from your people? So sometimes there's an artificial goal that gets substituted in when that happens, right? One that, well, I'll just beat last year's number. That's more. Or I'm going to lose 35 pounds this year. All right, well, maybe that's your goal. Maybe that's something that's there. But really, is 34 and a half awful? Is 36 like, whoa, blew it away? Look, it's 35 pounds. When you're a bigger guy as I am, I'm 6'3", 200 pounds. Yeah, I obscured that number a little bit. But, hey, 30 pounds for me, that could be a swing in any given year. Depends on if I'm getting the workouts in that I should and I'm eating right or if I'm not. Again, you hear that? It's about the behavior, right? But there could be another goal that just says, you know what, we're going to sell 20% more than we did last year. Why? Because 20% sounds like a good number. All right? Those are artificial goals. What I think would be smarter, what's wiser, what gives you more long-term satisfaction would be this. How about an activity-based goal? Now think about this. What we're trying to change with people is behaviors. And some people need a little bit more help than others to connect the dots, right? So here's an example of some activity-based goals. Log your food intake every day and focus on making healthy replacements in your diet. That's reasonable, right? It makes sense. I've, in the past, anytime that I have said, you know what, I want to lose some weight, instead of focusing on the scale, which just tends to frustrate me, what I tend to do is I think about how am I going to get there? And it's literally one, or maybe in my case, a few less bites at a time. So focus on making healthy replacements, putting less salt in the food, eating smaller portions, making choices that say, you know what, this particular side dish is a little less fatty than, maybe another side dish would be. This is a little healthier choice. Right? My daughter's on a quest to get me to eat more broccoli. I've told her I don't like it, and she thinks it's hilarious that Dad doesn't like broccoli. But what does she do? Every time she orders broccoli, which, by the way, she loves, she always says, Daddy, you have to eat some broccoli. I don't want to tell her, but I'm kind of starting to like broccoli. Sort of. Not all the time. Not the raw stuff. The texture's just too weird. But you see where you're going, right? Every week, maybe a goal would be, I want to meet face-to-face with 2 new clients. Or I want to make sure I make outbound phone calls 5 times a day to people that I haven't talked to in 6 months or less out of my network, right? I have 1,800 plus people in my LinkedIn connections. Most of them I've met one-on-one at least once somewhere in my life. If I just made the commitment to say I want to reach out to a certain number of those people every single day or so many people a week until I've run through that list, that would keep me busy for a long time. And I promise you, okay, see, here's the deal. I'm giving you advice, and what am I doing? I'm realizing here's what I need to be doing on the next few weeks. Why? Because this is a downtime of the year for me too. As I record this, I'm getting ready to head out this week for my final business trip of the year. And, I already got some friends. I'm watching online. A lot of my colleagues are, hey, it's my final trip of the year. I saw one today. Barlow, I saw you out there, buddy, posted up today that you thought you had finished up all your trips and You posted a photo this morning from you on a plane and you were by yourself. So I'm guessing somebody called and you had a chance to pick up some more business. Good for you, man. You didn't let off the gas pedal. And I think that's what we all have to be mindful of. I wasn't supposed to travel this week, but one of my clients called and said, hey, can you reschedule this day that we didn't have to do? We canceled it earlier in the year. And I was like, absolutely. It's time. It's available. It's Christmas time. A little extra cash in the bank wouldn't hurt. And the numbers will be even better for what's turning out to be perhaps my strongest year yet, which is great. But now I want to do more next year. And I think it's less focused on how much money do I want to make. And I think it's better for me to say, how much energy do I want to put forth that's better, right? Focus on the activity rather than the outcome, okay? For example, here's another activity-based goal. Maybe this coming year, you say, you know what? I want to go to one professional association meeting a month. You already go to one regularly? Then commit to a second one. It doesn't matter. Okay. Rotate it if you need to. Go to a different group. If you only have like 1 day or 2 days a month that you could actually go to meetings because your schedule's just prohibitively crazy, right? Like mine, that's fine. Then just rotate through. If you had 2 different groups and you alternated every other month, hey, that's 2 different groups of people you're still going to see 6 times this year. And, just get out there. That's the goal, right? Stuff some business cards in your pocket because you're going to meet new people every single time. And then you can set up this face-to-face, one-to-one, a virtual Skype meeting, however you want to do those meetings with clients. That works really well. Hey, make a commitment. Here's a great one. This is an easy one. This is easy, breezy, cheesy, whatever else might rhyme with easy, breezy, or cheesy. But commit to show up for work, even if you work from home or at a local coffee shop, right? So you freelancers that are out there, you solopreneurs, you employeepreneurs, however you describe yourself, 15 minutes earlier every single day. That's it. 15 minutes earlier every day. That'll steal you back an hour plus a week, right? Over an hour a week of extra time. Really 15 minutes, not a big deal, right? Here's another one. Strive, say your goal is just, I'm going to work out something 30 minutes a day, even if it's standing up at your desk and walking in place while you're on sales calls. I don't care. Do something different. That's how you're going to meet your goals every single time, right? It's focusing on what you can do. These are things you can control. Your activities, your action, your behaviors. Focus on those. If you have a bad day, you go, well, criminy, I messed up today. You know what? Tomorrow, I'm back at it again. And it's not a big deal. You're focused on activity. You're going to be planting those seeds earlier in the year so that later in the year, if the numbers that maybe your boss or other people are looking for, right? If your boss says, look, I want 30% more sales than you did last year. And by the way, your boss might be you, could be your kids, could be your spouse, could just be a business partner. Whoever sets goals for you, hey, I'd like to see you double your business this year. Well, then you need to ask yourself, what behavior, what actions could you do every single day that would make that a reality? What would it take? And focus on that. That's much easier to digest than saying, oh my gosh, unless I just hit the lotto, which literally the odds are you're not going to hit the lotto. So let's figure out what you can do, okay? So here's my goal for you. See, I'm setting a goal for you. Here's my expectation. This is all I'm going to ask you to do. Set some goals for next year, but set them as activity-based goals, not outcome goals. All right? That's my goal for you. In fact, hey, stop by the website, go to ideacharger.com, and then slash episode 19. That's spell out the word episode and then the numbers 19. You'll find an article that has a lot of what we just talked about, all of inside of it. But scroll down to the bottom. Do me a favor. Leave an example of what some of the goals are that you're setting for yourself in the year ahead. All right, let's start a discussion online. I'll be happy to jump in. We can hold you accountable. Maybe you can meet some other people here in the Idea Charger community. We'll help you make some connections. Let us know what you do and what you're going to focus on. We'll make some kick butt things happen for you next year. All right, that's what I got for you. Next week, you're going to hear about why you should never set goals. Well, sort of. But we'll talk some more about that too. Hey guys, we'll see you next week. Thanks, Success Chargers. If you enjoyed what you just heard, please post your 5-star review and subscribe to Success Charger today. Your future